Hello, everybody. This is Nick Totero, Professor of Information Technologies and Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. In this video, I'm going to explore and do some quick demonstrations of how I've been able to incorporate some AI-generated content into my course sites. Like many of you, you were probably introduced to AI in early December of 2022. My particular situation was my 16-year-old son comes running into my office. He shows me this publicly available AI site. He starts asking it questions. At the same time, he's writing code and he's asking the AI to generate code for him. And I was amazed. I was interested. I'm like, well, this is pretty interesting. And almost immediately, very, very quickly, I began to hear from my colleagues. I began to hear from friends throughout the United States saying, hey, Nick, did you get a chance to see this? Where are you falling on this area little word? And what I saw was immediately people jumped onto, oh, this is just going to be another avenue for academic dishonesty. Well, if you go back to the early 2000s, we heard that about Wikipedia. Uh, then I began to hear people say it's going to revolutionize education. And again, historically, if you go back 100 years, even further back than that, every so often a new technology comes out that's going to revolutionize education. I kind of began to see it a little bit differently. I saw it as a way to enhance what I was doing. Now, was I concerned that eventually my job or all educators' jobs was going to be replaced? Of course. And there's a lot of background associated with that. But then I began to realize for that to not happen, to not be replaced, it became important for me to embed myself more and more into my online course sites, right? I just can't allow this technology to completely replace me. That actually be very easy. And I figured there had to be ways for me to embed myself. So again, in this video, I'm going to do some quick demonstrations of how I'm using the embedded AI in Blackboard Ultra and how I believe it's improved my course delivery. So let's go up to my course site. And here is my little demonstration site. I will tell you, I create a lot of videos. So I have this little demonstration site up here where I can do a lot of demonstrations so my students don't get confused if I'm using one site or another, and I'll let them know this is just a demonstration site. Like many of you, regardless of the discipline, we often rely upon case studies. We look at what has happened in the industry. I teach cybersecurity, and there is a lot of case studies about data breaches and things like that. Now, unfortunately, sometimes those case studies will be a little condescending. Now, they'll be obviously after the fact, and the person who ever wrote those case studies will be condescending. Like, how can this possibly happen? I don't like those case studies because it's that hindsight is 2020 mentality bothers me a little bit. So I go out there and I hunt different case studies, ones that are relevant to our particular area, and then I do a review on them, make sure that they don't have that kind of hindsight is 2020. But they'll often give this is how we could have fixed it. One of the case studies, and this isn't so important for our discussion here, but one of the case studies in the cybersecurity realm has to deal with the cyber attack against Sony Pictures. Long story about that. That's for different videos. If you're ever interested in cybersecurity, we can talk about that. But I'm going to explore how I would take a case study and pretty much take that case study into a bigger project. I'm going to use learning modules in here because what I want is I want my students to go through things very sequentially because I'm building upon the knowledge. I'm building and creating a platform or direction that I want my students to go. So I chose to do it as a learning module. The only thing I have right now is I have an empty learning module that has 2 case studies in it. I have a case study that was written by Columbia University and I have a case study written by Johns Hopkins University. At this moment in time, I am just going to be concerned with the case study from Columbia. Later on, I'm going to begin to incorporate both case studies. So if I was to go, and I've already uploaded them to save some time, but if I was to go to the case study of Baseball in Columbia, it's a PDF file. And what I want here, it's about 15 pages long. I think total content, about 10 to 12 pages long. The first thing I want is I just want my students to read the case study and get a general idea. Now, if they want to print it out and they want to highlight it, that's up to them. We are allowed to, download that PDF. But at this moment in time, in this first part, all I want them to do is read the case study and get a base understanding of that case study so we can go on. So here's my PDF. What can I do? Well, normally when I want my students just to read something, I will create a test for them, a little quiz. And I'll try to keep that quiz very simple and ask some very simple questions to make sure that we've hit that point. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the generative AI to build a test bank that I can build quizzes on. So I'm going to go to Manage Test Bank. And I'm going to say auto generate. And I'm going to just give it a quick description here. Now, what I want to do is previously what I would do is I would read the case study and I'd find certain key points that I think everybody would find very immediately, and then I would create this test bank. Now here's where this generative AI can help me here and can save me a lot of time. I'm going to have it create a bunch of simple questions. So I'm going to say select course item. And I'm going to pick the Sony attack from Columbia University. I'm going to say select that item. And instead of saying inspire me, great option here says just randomly create a bunch of questions, right? I'm going to keep things very simple because again, my sole premise is, did you read the PDF? So I'm going to just go with some true and false questions, right? That should be fairly simple for the students to get through. I'm not overly concerned at this point about grades and assessment. That will come later, right? So complexity, I'm going to put that right at the middle at about a 5. Number of questions, I'm going to crank that all the way up to 10, and I'm going to say generate. Now I sped that up a little bit. I time compressed it a little bit here. And here we have a bunch of questions. It does warn me against accuracy and bias, and that's a good thing. But I will tell you, I'm not going to take this on face value. One of the things, again, to embed myself into this technology is this is a starting point for me to go through. And one of the things I will begin to notice, I've run this several times, is there tends to be a lot more correct or true answers than there are false. For 10 questions, there are, just in this particular example, there appears to be 1, 2, 2 out of 10, 20% are false. I'm not real happy with that. But I will also tell you in my own personal creation of files, I tend to lean also towards that true. So here's a little bit of a bias that the AI is kind of leaning towards always going to true. So we got to be careful. Can I edit them? Absolutely. Now, a lot of times when we look at AI, it tells us to watch for bias. We want to watch for its bias, which is completely true. And you can read a lot of articles on the internet basically stating how, there was a bias into the AI. What about my bias? What about the instructor's bias? Maybe there was things inside this PDF file that I overemphasized in my question bank. The AI may show that saying, wait a second here, the AI is kind of leaning in this direction. Maybe we can meet in the middle. Now, for simplicity's sake here, and just for a little bit of time, I would not pick all 10 of these questions. I would go through them and kind of pick them, the ones that I want. But to expedite this explanation, I'm just going to pick a couple at random. I'm going to say, okay, the attacker released stolen files. Yeah, I think that's good. Sony Corporation had a strong reputation problem. Okay. And again, I would go through and hand select all these. All right. And what I'm trying to do, I'd say add 5 questions to the test bank. Let it generate. and it's created this particular test bank. Well, what I want in this regard, and again, this is now not so much the AI, this is the instructor. I want a test bank at least 25 to 30 questions because I want to maybe just ask 5 questions out of 30. So it's much more random. So every student would get their own individual test, or maybe 10 questions, I would say. But I want to create a much bigger test bank. So I'd keep on doing this. All right. So there is my test bank. Now I'm going to speed up a little bit here. I'm going to do a little time dilation. I'm going to press things down where I am going to create a simple test using that test bank. I can go into each of those questions and modify them. But again, I'm just going to create a very, very simple test. You don't have to watch the whole thing. It's going to be time compressed, but I'm going to create a exam. So now I have a case study that I want the students to read. I have a test to see if they read it. What I'm going to do here is make sure that that is all coming up. So I'm going to go to my student preview. And let's see, can we start this? Yes, we can. Let's pretend that I've read this thoroughly. That's going to take me to the quiz. They should be able to do it as many times as they like. All right. So we know this is all working. Okay, we're at the point where I want to make sure that my students have a comfortable working knowledge of this particular case study. Now, the first method I'm going to use is something I've been using for years. I'm very comfortable with it. Has to do with adaptive releases. I don't want them going on to the next case study until they've basically proven that they've read the first case study and they have a strong working knowledge. The other one is kind of new for me. It's actually very new for me, and it's more along the lines of a suggested approach. So I'm going to have a required point where they can't go any further, and the other ones I'm going to have a suggested. Let's real quickly, I'm going to do an adaptive release on the John Hopkins. So I'm going to say release conditions. And I'm going to say for all members, it's going to be based upon performance. It's going to be based upon that quiz that I created, that one just to see if they read it. Now, that quiz I will probably grade, will be part of their grade. It'll be a small part of their grade, just so they feel like they've accomplished something. And I'm going to say they're going to have to score at least 7 points or higher to go any further. So it's a simple adaptive release. So the requirement is basically to go on to the Sony Attack, the John Hopkins version. They're going to have to score at least a 70%, 7 points out of 10. But here, I've been doing that for a while now. For many years, I have adaptive releases, so I know that they've accomplished certain things. The next one is to build a comfort discussing this particular topic. Now, here is something new. I'm going to do a create and going to scroll all the way down, and I'm going to create an AI conversation. almost a practice zone. Yes, I would love for them to talk about this within the class. I would love to have them talk between each other, with the faculty, with other people, but that might be uncomfortable for some individuals. So I'm going to create this little practice conversation. We will call it, this conversation will be the Sony attack, and we'll go optional conversation. All right. And we'll definitely show it. And this particular topic, let's see, what question that I can get them thinking? Okay. Why was the Sony attack considered a landmark event in the cybersecurity world? Question mark. So simple little question to get them thinking of other questions they could potentially ask. The image, I'll make that a little personal here, have a little fun with this. I'm going to choose a little white rabbit, a little nod to Alice in Wonderland, kind of a tour guide going down the rabbit hole. All right, that looks good. And the name is just going to be Cyber Rabbit. A little fun there. Personality trait of the Cyber Rabbit. It's going to be very supportive, and we're going to say happy. Right? Just kind of keep. And I'm going to say save here. I'm not going to have them necessarily earn additional points. I mean, we can leave that be. Again, this is just an attempt to get them talking about things, more or less forming questions that they can work with. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say preview the chat. And it says, hi, my name is Cyber Rabbit. My response are generative AI. Therefore, they could be biased or not, or they could be inaccurate. Share your initial thoughts when you're done. Okay. Why was the Sony attack considered a landmark event in the cybersecurity world? They could write a response. They could write a question. They can say, I believe the Sony attack was the first attack from a foreign country against a private business. And we basically see that the Cyber Rabbit, what did you think was the main motivation behind the foreign country's decision to attack Sony? And again, now we're kind of thinking, I believe it was revenge for the movie The Interview. So what we're seeing here is not so much, to me, it's not so much the response back from the AI. It's just an AI encouraging the participant to have this discussion. Why do you think the choice to attack a private business rather than a government entity was significant in this course? It was because Sony Pictures made a movie that offended North Korea. What do you believe was the broader implication for our business and industries following the Sony attack? And again, I'm not really grading this. This is just another avenue for the student to potentially explore. In this particular case, I would make it an optional conversation that they can practice. Hopefully, they would find it interesting and really commit to the dialogue. Right? Going to make it visible to the student. Doing okay. So what do we have here? They read the first case study. There's a simple little quiz that they have to score 70% or better on. Yeah, I could potentially make the optional conversation release. I don't want to do that. But I did make the next case study released upon the condition that they scored at least a 70 or above. Okay, before we go any further, let's recap what I've done. Let's recap what I've done using AI. I started with a case study, a PDF case study. I allowed it to create a series of simple questions, true and false, designed around making sure that the students read. So I had the AI create a test bank for me. And yes, I proofread them and I made sure that there were questions that I wanted in there and I removed questions. That probably saved me an hour to an hour and a half creating questions on my own. Then you factor in my poor typing skills. So that saved some time. That was a perfect example of using AI as an assistant. But we can get test banks from publishers and things like that. The next thing I did was I created a quiz, and that quiz would affect the release condition for the next case study, the one that's a little bit more verbose. Again, been doing that for a while. That has nothing to do really with AI. But then I created, now this is new, I created an optional conversation that the students can basically practice asking questions and getting replies and feedback and etc. Now we're on to the more challenging things, more of it, less of an AI being an assistant and more of an AI being a partner, somebody that I can have ideals off of, or they can provide ideals back to me. We're going to use or expand upon the Sony attack case study from Johns Hopkins. If I was to open that up, it's a little bit more verbose. It's like 45 some odd pages, 44 pages. So in this particular case study, they've already read the first one, which is about 15 pages. Now they're at this one. They should have a strong understanding of what is going on or what happened in this particular case study. So I don't want to just make sure that they read it. I want them to have a free flowing discussion with other students because maybe they missed something or maybe they saw something that was pretty critical. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a discussion. Scroll down, create a discussion. And look, we have up here, we have an auto-generated discussion. And again, what the AI is going to do, it's going to create a series of discussion topics that I can look and I can review, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say select course content. We've seen this before, very similar to creating the test bank. And this time I'm going to pick the Johns Hopkins PDF. And I'm going to say selected. I could pick the Sony, but you know what? Let's go on to the Johns Hopkins. And this time I'm going to let it inspire me. You think, or let the AI, again, this is kind of a dialogue between, at this point, a dialogue between me and the AI. See, if I can think of something and maybe the AI can think of something and maybe those two things will match. But I'm going to say inspire me. I'm going to leave it relatively higher because we're at the point that the student should be able to understand it more. I'm going to say generate the discussion title, and let's generate. All righty, exploring the impacts of cybersecurity, creating a cybersecurity awareness plan. That's kind of interesting. Analyzing attributes of cybersecurity. Let's see this one. Creating. No, let's keep going. None of these really jump out at me. I'm going to do the same thing. Ooh. Analyzing the impact of the Sony attack. That one kind of intrigues me. If I see the cognitive learning level, we have analyze. maybe, well, what about the evaluating cybersecurity measures in response to the Sony attack? I'm kind of between the analyze and the evaluate. I'm leaning more towards just personal preference, knowing where my students would be at this particular moment in the semester. I'm going to pick on the analyze the impact of the Sony attack, and I'm going to say add. You can see it auto-generated up here. That's not a big deal, but auto-generated the title. And here is the discussion. Before I go any further, I kind of want to tweak this a little bit. There's more to this, even something as simple as how many posts I want from them, how many replies I want to them. So let me tweak. What I'm going to add real quickly, I'm going to say after your initial post, wait and reply to at least 2 other participants' post and reply. Now, I've begun to understand my students, and a lot of times I have to almost force the discussion, right? And that's understandable. Eventually, maybe forcing becomes softer and gently persuade, and eventually they will catch on. So, how I'm going to particularly grade this discussion is going to be each student's going to have an initial post, and then they're going to have to reply to 2 other people. I will also explain to them that, the grades will be based on your initial post and reply. I'll change this a little slightly, and I'll say, please do not just agree or disagree, provide evidence. All right. Some of the other things I would probably put in here. I like this where it says support your arguments with relevant examples and evidence. So maybe I'll highlight that a little bit. All right. So they kind of, and I would go through this and kind of read through which were the attributes, etc. I would sit here and I would massage to get to the point where I would happy with this discussion question. Since I'm expecting them to really think about this, it's time to start grading this particular material. All right, so I've tweaked this. Sorry for the jump there. I've tweaked this. I've added what I wanted. And now it's something I want to grade. I want them to participate actively. I want to grade it. I want to show what level they've participated here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, before I get discussion isn't graded, I'm going to turn that on, but I am going to copy the discussion's name. All right, and I'll say discussion. I'll say, yep, that's fine. They have to post first. I like when students post first. I don't like them reading other people's discussions and then form. I like that raw, what do you think approach. I'm going to allow them to edit, and I'm going to grade the discussion. I'm not this is a personal thing. I'm not a big fan of allow anonymous posts. I think you should be able to put your name to what you are initially posting and what you're replying to. I'll put a little date here. And I'll say, yeah, 100 points are good. I'm going to add a rubric. And you notice that now I could either create a rubric from scratch, or you know what? Let's discuss it with the AI. I'm going to say generate. I'm going to say short. I'm going to use the title, analyze the impact of the Sony attack. All right. We'll keep it as percentage. Complexity, we'll keep it medium. Number of columns, my general columns, I tend to go, what is this one, 4? Yeah, that's about the average that I like to use. So it's a 4x4, and then I'm going to generate. All right, so here we have a nice little rubric. Let's see what we got here. Depth of analysis. Okay, I could agree with that one. Clear in communication. That appears to be spread out. Logical organization. Okay, I kind of understand that. That might be a little bit too verbose for this particular discussion and to demonstrate knowledge. You know what? I'm going to tweak ever so slightly the logical organization. to say save here. All right, so now we have a rubric and let's use it. So we can see we have a discussion. It's a certain due date. It's 100 points. Here we're going to use the discussion 01 rubric. We're going to save. And now we have a discussion thread, right? So this is a little bit beefier. This one I want to grade. This one I fully collaborated with the AI. And so my students will have a place to discuss the topic of this particular case study. And if I close this, we can see now it is visible to the students. Okay, it's time for another recap. We started with basically an empty learning module, and I used a learning module versus using a folder because I wanted my students to go through a sequence of events. I wanted to monitor that, so I chose that learning module. This learning module is based upon the Sony cyber attack, and we're fundamentally focusing on 2 PDFs that I'm going to be providing to the students. The first PDF is fairly light. It's about 10 to 12 pages of reading. After that, I want them to take a little quiz so they could go on further, that at least they read it and they began to have the topic. That quiz was created by building a test pool that I had the AI generate a series of true and false questions that I monitored and I reviewed and maybe I tweaked. That simple test was designed more to make sure that the student read the content. If they scored a 70 or above, then they can proceed on to the next case study. Or not necessarily the next case study, but the next document in the same case study. I did create an optional conversation so they could begin to start practicing asking questions that may be relevant to that Sony attack. Now, at this stage, the first iteration, I would probably not grade it, but I would see what the students did. They kind of almost pilot this conversation. If I didn't see a lot of activity, the next time I would run this course, I wouldn't make that conversation optional. I would attach a grade to it. But the first time, because I'm not sure what's going to go on, I created this little optional conversation. Those students can talk back and forth with the AI. They then were required to read the same case study, but presented by Johns Hopkins. And after that, then they got into a nice long discussion. I collaborated with the AI to come up with a discussion topic. I collaborated with AI to create a rubric to grade that particular topic. And all that, again, was generated by the auto generation of the AI reading that particular PDF. Let's finish off this learning module with a significant project. Now, with it being a significant project, I'm just not at this point in time completely comfortable turning the entire project or the content over to AI. But again, I want to collaborate because maybe the AI can have a topic for the project that might be better suited, but I'm not going to turn everything over. At this point, once I create that assignment, I'm going to treat it as a placeholder, right? So that I'm going to have something, and then if I need to tweak it or build it or build a better project, I can do that another time and come back to it. So what I'm going to do is, after the conversation or after the discussion, I'm going to say create. And this is going to be an assignment. And I'm going to auto-generate the assignment. And what I'm thinking is I don't want just a paper. I want a presentation. I think presentations are so critical in a lot of the cybersecurity and a lot of our topics. So the students get comfortable that they can present their findings and future tasks to whoever. So I'm gonna say, under description, we're gonna say create a presentation, and the course items I'm going to use in this regard. In this one, I'm going to use both of the PDF files. that one. And I'm going to select the items. Now, this one, the desired cognitive level, I want a little higher, right? I just don't want it to apply or analyze. I want them to create something. And so I'm going to say create, because again, it's going to match create a presentation. And I'm going to keep it pretty much at that level there, and I'm going to generate. All right, let's see what we have here. Authentic presentation, cybersecurity, interactive video scenario, design in an infographic. No, none of those reach out to me, so let's generate some more. Creative solution for cybersecurity challenge. Innovative strategy to combat cyber attacks, unleashing the power of innovation. And I like the innovative strategies to combat a cyber attack, and I'm going to add here. Now, I'm only treating this as a placeholder. I wouldn't stop here. I would actually take this offline and allow myself to really investigate these particular topics. But this is a good place to just be. I'm going to assign a due date, change some things around. I'm going to come back to it. But it's treated just as a placeholder. But more important at this point, I'm going to add a grading rubric, but I'm not going to have the AI generate the grading rubric. Maybe I've been doing projects for a long time. I think all of us have been doing projects for a long time, and I have a consistent grading rubric that I've used, and it's a tried and true rubric. So in this regard, I'm going to say, yeah, use this particular rubric, and then we're going to save. I'm not overly concerned with the points at this point, the rubrics, the number of attempts. Again, this is just a placeholder. I would take this particular information and I would build a project offline. So there probably is a bunch of stuff that is in here that I would want the students to maybe investigate a little bit further. Maybe there's stuff in here that I don't want them to necessarily spend a great deal of time. Maybe this project would be a PowerPoint project. Maybe it could be a video, but this is basically just a placeholder because I said, yeah, that looks pretty decent here. And I'm going to leave it hidden. Right? Because I don't want the students working on this particular project until I'm completely happy with it. So again, I work with it offline and bring it here. Let's wrap some things up. We covered a lot of material here, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of what the AI could do. I started very simple. Create me a test bank, right? I think that saves me a great amount of time, but there's not a lot of interaction between me and the AI. I'm not really collaborating. I'm basically telling an assistant, go out and create a bunch of questions for me, and I'll review the questions, and away we go. I'm not going to make that many change. I love the ideal of creating an AI conversation. And we saw that. Now, since I've never used the AI conversation before, the first iteration, probably not going to grade it, going to be optional, maybe extra credit, I don't know. I know if I make it extra credit, then the students will tend to participate more, but I want to see. Based upon what I discovered in this iteration of that conversation, I would probably enhance it and bring it out to the next iteration for the next class. I then wanted a deeper discussion for the students on the particular topic. I had them read a more advanced PDF, and then using the AI based upon that advanced PDF, I had the AI generate the beginnings of a discussion topic. What's more important is I was able still to go in there and tweak it and make it somewhat mine, but I would say it was probably a 75-25 split. 75% was coming from AI, 25% was coming from me. And then I created a rubric for that very specific discussions, because as I probably maybe build additional discussions for additional areas, I don't want to use a generic rubric. I would want a rubric for each discussion. And in the past, I would have to create those, or I'd just kind of rely upon having a very generic rubric at that regard. Now I could have a very specific rubric based upon the discussion's topic. I think that's a very, very nice feature. Finally, I created a placeholder. We're trying to get to the point in this particular assignment that they're going to create a very significant assignment. So this is the whole learning module would probably be released near midterm, and then the assignment would be due at the end of the semester. This would after all their readings and all their discussions, and hopefully in the discussions people would be adding more PDFs. So I don't know what this last assignment would finally look like. But I have a placeholder with a general thought that I can take offline and begin to build. And then I would come back and finish it up. Maybe I would have a template or something along that lines. It could be a PowerPoint. It could be a combination of PowerPoint and a written document or something. So I have the placeholder because I've done projects in the past. I didn't want to recreate a whole new rubric for a project. So I went out and I got a rubric that I've used over the years, a good mixing and matching in this regard. So covered a lot of material. I hope you enjoyed the video. And with that being said, I always end all my videos with, let's go out and learn something.